Taking the pulse of Bexar County, finding out what issues matter most to those who live and work in our city. Dave Metz has been a big part of that with Bexar Facts, perhaps the most important part. He is a pollster. He is also with FM3 Research. He's a research partner and president. Dave Metz joins us once again as the poll was released this morning. Dave, your general overview of, I guess for lack of a better word, the tone of this poll. What do you think San Antonio and Bexar County residents are telling us?
Well, I think overall we're still seeing remarkably positive feelings from local residents. They think things in the county and the city are headed in the right direction. About 2/3 of them approve of the performance of local elected officials. And while they recognize a number of issues facing the community that they think need to be addressed, overall their outlook is more positive than negative.
Of course, we've got the city elections just around the corner, less than a month now. You all focused on how the mayor's race is shaping up, something we've touched on a little bit here. But of course, two of the candidates, the incumbent and Greg Brockhouse, a very tight race last go round. It's not looking that way this time. So what did you all find?
Well, our poll shows that the mayor is in a very strong position as he campaigns for re-election. Not only does he have the approval of about 2/3 of the local electorate on his overall job performance, he's got 56% support in the race right now compared to 21% for Brockhouse. So that's obviously a very commanding lead for the mayor, both in terms of the fact that he's got a major double-digit lead over his nearest opponent, but also that he's over that 50% threshold. And I think that's really the key thing to keep an eye on over the final weeks of the campaign is he able to retain that majority support that might potentially allow him to avoid a runoff?
And that's my question, too. I mean, we were talking about, less than 3,000 votes that separated these two men just 2 years ago. If he stays at that 56%, he avoids a runoff, which is quite an accomplishment when you have 8 people in this race.
That's right. And I should caution that in our poll, we only tested the top 3 candidates. Just given time limitations, that's all we really had room for in the poll. And it's possible when you consider all the other names on the ballot that could drag the mayor's performance down slightly. And we need to keep in mind the poll has a 4% margin of error. So it's close. The mayor's close to that threshold. And obviously that, I'm sure, is what he's going to be focused on over the final weeks of the campaign.
A lot in this poll, so many different topics that you all ask about. And of course, approval ratings for state and local elected leaders are typically included in that. But this poll also asked people how they feel about the February winter storm that we saw when there was a massive failure of the state's power grid. And people weighed in on who they blame for that and also whether they're okay with seeing some prices increase for energy if we could avoid this in the future. I found that so interesting. What did you all find?
Well, what we saw overall is that of all the different state and local actors that might have played a role in the reaction to the storm and the power outages, ERCOT is the one that the public really points a finger to. An outright majority of voters say they hold them most responsible for the problems that followed the winter storm. And I think the storm provided something of a wake-up call for local voters. By roughly a 2-to-1 margin, they say that they would be willing to pay higher rates for utilities in order to improve the energy infrastructure. I think the weaknesses of the system were exposed by the storm, and voters are now aware that without additional investment, there's a risk that these kinds of problems could occur again in the future, and they're willing to open up their own wallets to try to prevent them.
You said and rightly in this poll, a lot of the blame was placed at the state level. I mean, even some people putting some of the blame on Governor Greg Abbott. But there was also some fallout for CPS Energy compared to their approval ratings that we've seen in the other 4 polls that we did.
That's right. We've seen in the past polling that typically about 2/3 of local voters say that they approve of the performance of CPS Energy. And that took a sharp hit in this poll. We now have less than half of voters saying they approve of the company's performance and a plurality that tell us they disapprove. So while they may look to state government first as sort of the first place they place some blame, they definitely think there have been some shortfalls on the side of CPS as well.
Something else that I wanted to ask you about, too, and another reason that I like looking at these results is because it takes topics that we're all talking about and really finds that tone of where voters stand on it. The Alamo, that's something that has been making headlines again and again when it comes to the stops and starts of that project. So you all ask people how they feel about where that redesign plan is now. What did you all find?
Well, we saw very strong support for preserving public access to the Alamo and restoring it. 87% of those polled agree that Alamo Plaza needs to remain free and accessible to the public at all times, and 66% agree that it needs to be restored. They recognize that there's going to have to be some place that the money comes from to accomplish that goal. And we found that a slim majority, 52%, agreed that the plaza should be available to rent for private events in order to help raise money to support the site. That sort of limited restriction on public access, if it's going toward that goal of restoration, seemed to be something that they're comfortable with. But overall, their top priority is making sure that the site remains accessible for local residents.
Dave Metz, who does the polling for Bexar Facts, a part of the Bexar Facts Brain Trust, along with his day job at FM3 Research. We really appreciate your time. I also want to tell people that this entire process and why KSAT and the San Antonio report feel so comfortable being part of Bexar Facts. It's very transparent. You can go to Bexar Facts website, bexarfacts.org, and you can see the crosstabs in this poll and see kind of how it was conducted. You can also take the poll yourself there on bexarfacts.org. And of course, we have so much more on this poll than we could cover in 5 or 6 minutes. It's on our website at ksat.com. Dave, appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for the chance to be with you.